Can I welcome everyone to the meeting of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee on Monday the 28th of September. Can I remind members the meeting is being recorded and will subsequently be made available to the public for listening. Could I ask if there are any apologies today?
Good afternoon. We've got apologies from Councillors Foster and Gilroy, and we're missing Councillors Martin and Ogilvie. The apologies. Thank you.
Okay, any other apologies? Okay. Okay, item number 2, do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, item number 3, which is the Zero Waste Segregated Collection Service report on the rollout in Wigtownshire. Members obviously asked for this matter to be deferred from the last meeting to give members more time to consider the report. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
Thank you, Chair, and very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a panel who are going to help me with the report to answer your questions and your inquiries, etc. And I'm delighted to introduce, first of all, Charlie Devine, who's the Head of Resource Management at Zero Waste Scotland. Also his colleague Andy Dick, who is the Local Authority Programme Manager. And they are here today to help members address questions that may be associated with government policy, government funding, the new Zero Waste Charter and its code of practice, and issues how they may see waste in the future in Scotland going forward. And I'm very grateful for their attendance today. We also have Ronnie Dempster, who under the reshaping of the Council, under the new EEI department, will be responsible for waste collection going forward. And we have Stephen Herriot, who will be the Head of Infrastructure, Transportation, but also Head of the Waste Policy. And we have Greg Blaney, who's our Principal Waste Officer at Service Manager level. And hopefully they'll be able to answer the questions members have and address your concerns. That's all I have to say at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alistair. Okay, can I open it up to any members' questions? I've got Ian and then Roberta.
Thanks, Chairman. As you know, this is an important and has been a contentious item. And as the Director will be aware, my group had submitted a number of questions on the minutiae of the report, and I'm grateful for Greg Blaney's reply, which came through this morning. The report itself contains many technical details, routes info and health and safety issues which are extremely important in of themselves. It says much of the chapter for household recycling in Scotland in great detail and improvements in the Wigtown area recycling. However, the report lacks detail and does not deal with the need to vary the PFI contract, which I think is extremely important. It's importantly the detail on the effect on the Council's budget, which was endorsed by the CE himself in relation to service reviews. The Keel report's attached, which runs to 46 pages, and insofar as I'm aware, the commissioning of this report was not done by the Council. Many have heard from staff who are expected to implement the system and what the problems are. Importantly, this report probably should have been commissioned long before now as a result of that. Equally importantly, this financial information is only contained on one page in Appendix 2, and at the same time the report before us contains no sustainable financial information, and there is no reference to costs at 3.3.3, 3.4.1, 3.4.6 and 4.5. The report's very full of technical detail, but very light on financial information. And I don't think we've really any idea where we're going with this. The recommendations in the report does nothing to address the fundamental areas in relation to the variation of the Shanks contract and whether or not this Council should or should not be rolling out zero waste across Dumfries and Galloway, or whether we should be reviewing how we should be implementing the regulations. The report makes reference to the establishment of a project board. Why now? Has there not been a board running and controlling this project to date? And if not, why not? Frankly, Chairman, I think this is going to have a major impact on the Council's budget, which, as you're aware, I've had some concerns for some considerable time. Members are not aware of the views of Zero Waste Scotland on the entire matter, despite the fact that I had sight of a letter from earlier this year Zero Waste Scotland expressing grave concerns about the Council's rollout of zero waste. The recommendations in the report are full of promises which may or may not be delivered, and therefore our Council faces a major problem. I think it's with considerable regret I don't think we can address this issue without external assistance, and I would therefore suggest we approach Zero Waste Scotland with a view to commissioning their services to institute a root and branch review of the delivery of zero waste in Dumfries and Galloway. We also need the Director of Corporate Services to produce a detailed account of expenditure in the Wigtown pilot to date to get costs incurred and the likely costs to be incurred with a variation of contract. And finally, Chair, I would therefore like to formally move a motion in 3 parts. First of all, to agree to ask Zero Waste Scotland to do a full review of the delivery of zero waste services in Dumfries and Galloway. Agree that the Corporate Director produces a detailed account of expenditure in the Wigtown pilot. And finally, agree to ask external auditors to review the commissioning and implementation of the zero waste project to include advice sought and given and on what subjects. And I would formally move that, Chair. And I can produce a copy of that for your information. Thank you very much.
You took the words out of my mouth, Ian. Do you have a copy of that there for Claire? Okay, I'll ask the Director just to respond to a couple of the points you made there, Ian.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. On the first point, we are already in discussions with Zero Waste Scotland regarding a review of the rollout in Wigtown. That is going to take 2 levels. The first level will be a strategic overview of the service to indicate in detail what resources we require to carry out a detailed review as indicated in the post-implementation plan and as indicated in the action plan subsequent to that. So that is being addressed as we speak.
Just on that first point, Ian, are you happy with that? Do you want to
No,
come back
Chair,
on that?
I'm asking for a full formal review. I'm asking Zero Waste Scotland to institute a review of delivery of services.
You want to explain what a formal review is then, because I'm not aware of what a formal review is. I'm not aware what the difference between what the Director's just said and what you're asking for actually is.
Well, basically it's to ask them to come in and do their own root and branch review of the delivery of zero waste. So, for example, when we asked PricewaterhouseCoopers to do the review of finances and social services, it's that kind of independent review.
Right, I acknowledge Councillor Dick's point. We'll have to discuss that with Zero Waste Scotland from a point of view of commissioning that and what the costs associated with that may be. And that's why, in the first instance, we're having this strategic overview to determine what resources and what detail is needed so we can look at the potential cost of that review.
I'm given the fact that Zero Waste Scotland have also been working in partnership with the Council on this. You make a point about an independent review. It's a wee bit like asking the Scottish Government to review the regulations they imposed on us that actually caused a lot of this in the first place, Ian, do you not think?
I do understand that, and that's why I split it into 2, that external auditors review the commissioning and implementation of the zero waste, whereas Zero Waste actually look at the delivery of those services and deal with their areas of concern.
So could you repeat the first part again? Who did you say there, Ian? Sorry, external auditors now?
I know, part 3, external auditors review the commissioning and implementation, whereas I'm asking for Zero Waste Scotland to do a review of the delivery of these services that's currently in place.
Zero Waste Scotland sitting right there, Chairman. Surely could ask them what their view is.
Yeah, I think I'll chair the meeting, Ian, thanks. Okay, so we're happy with the first one and in terms of clear on that one. Can we just turn to the second one, Ian, just to explain that one again, what you're looking for here?
Well, as I indicated in my preamble, there is much of the financial information for the Wigtown pilot is contained in one page. There are a number of omissions, such as, for example, the operation of black parks, which requires expenditure on an indemnity letter prior to the variation of the contract. We're currently paying staff in Black Park and Shank staff in Galdenach. It's really every aspect and in much more detail than we're currently being presented here. And we need a report on that in order to review it, in order to establish what the costs, true costs, all the costs overrun are, and what implications that's got for the rollout throughout the rest of Dumfries and Galloway, because my major concern is that is going to have importance on the strategic budget.
Thanks for that, Ian. Alistair, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. The indemnity letter and the issues associated with the waste PFI, as they're very much integrated into our collection system, all waste that we collect, the contract dictates that we have to deliver it to a private sector partner. These issues are not contained in this report. This report is purely about the rollout of the collection system. And as I've indicated, these details and costs will come forward in future reports to this committee. So there's no intention to discuss these items in this report. This is purely about the rollout of the waste collection report, which had specific discrete funding from Zero Waste Scotland and from the Council's capital programme. These other issues that you've related to are supported by other budgets, principally the PFI Sinking Fund. So these issues will come forward to members in detail, as indicated in the report, but there was no intention to implicate them in this report.
Thanks for that. Do you want to come back to that? You know, one concern I've got with your wording, Ian, is that your motion there obviously replaces everything that's in the report in terms of the recommendation, and what I'm keen to get is the detailed report set out in the recommendation. I want to see these detailed reports come before the committee, and they're quite clear in the report. So I'd be concerned about removing all the detail that's from 2.24 onwards in the recommendation and replacing it with a pretty general statement around number 2 that you've mentioned. So we can always come back to that, but I want to see the detailed reports as well. I mean, in addition to the ones that are contained here in terms of the report, I think one of the things that I certainly think is missing from the figures we've got today is just to what extent is the overspend broken down? How much of it is actually one-off cost, therefore it's not recurring? How much of it is likely to be recurring costs, so we have to deal with that, and obviously we'll look at the plan and bringing that back under budget, and what part of the costs are, for example, things that couldn't have been anticipated by the members who voted for this in November 2012, I'll remind you. What wasn't anticipated, for example, there are new Scottish Government regulations that have came in since then that have obviously added to costs around commercial vehicles, etc. So we need a breakdown of those detailed costs, and I think that's important to have in a future report. So if that's the areas you're looking to cover, then I don't have a problem with that, but I would be keen to include also all the wording that's in the recommendations around the PFI and the indemnity letter and the contract variation. Obviously that'd have to be a separate report, because if it is a PFI, as you're aware, we have to take that in private because it's obviously around, there's commercial sensitivity there. But that's contained in the recommendations here today, so I wouldn't like to take those out of the recommendations. Yeah.
I completely agree. I don't want to take anything away from the recommendations that are already there. It is important to get that detail. The motion really is to add to what's already there. My major concern was I fully expected, I thought we were actually going to be getting, and there were indications given that these one-off costs and the variation would be coming forward, and I actually expected to see that, whether it's held in private or not. Of course, I do understand that. What primarily concerns me, the overall arching thing, is why was this variation of contract not done long before we're in this situation?
I suspect we'd have to obviously deal with that when we discuss the PFI report, obviously. You know. Okay, in terms of the third point, agree to ask external auditors to review the commissioning and implementation of the Zero Waste project to include advice sought and given on what subjects. Do you want to respond to that, or do you want to elaborate on that, Ian?
Yeah, I think it would have been inappropriate to have asked Zero Waste Scotland to deal with the commissioning and implementation of the project, which is why I've asked for external auditors.
Chair, there's no doubt that for the financial year 15-16, and what we are in at the moment, at the end of 15-16, our external auditors will look at our accounts and you will receive their view of the accounts, which will include expenditure on these matters, and will also include expenditure on the matters related to the waste PFI. So the external auditors will look at that naturally, and they are taking cognizance of the council's final accounts for 15-16.
Do you want to come back in? Is there anything you're asking for that's not obviously external auditors? In fact, those members of the audit committee will have seen the external auditors report for the last financial year. Is there anything you're asking for that's not actually already investigated by external auditors?
It's primarily the way in which it's been run and how we've gone about our commissioning of the services. That's why I've asked for that, and that's why I deliberately asked for appropriate outside auditors rather than Zero Waste Scotland. How we've been running this thing up until now, because in the body of this report it mentions the fact we're now setting up a project board. I always assumed that we ran these things with a project board before, but clearly not. If we're now setting another one up, what's the difference between that and the old one?
Just remind us what paragraph you're referring to, Ian.
Second. Chair, if you want to take somebody else, just dig the thing out there.
Okay, can I open up to any other members' questions? Alistair. Oh, sorry, I've got Roberta, then Ian, and then Alistair. Sorry.
Chair, I'll keep it very short. I'm very sympathetic to what Councillor Dick has been saying, but however, you have clarified a lot of the issues, so I'll wait for the rest of the debate.
Ian?
No, thanks, Chairman. I think a lot has been discussed, a lot has been covered already, but I think my main issue with this is the fact that we did agree in November 2012. You've already touched on the point that what did we actually agree to at that point, and it's the implementation time. I mean, I thought we'd agreed to all the variances of change to the contract with Shanks and so on and so forth, and my understanding was within about a year, there around about, so it would be well underway, and 18 months after that date, we get a report back to say, listen, we've actually went 435k over budget in Wigtown as a pilot. It hasn't been implemented anywhere else across the other three areas across Dumfries and Galloway. And we're just not sure what to do. It just feels like a bit of a dog's breakfast, even though I can certainly, when you read through it, it's complicated. There's a lot of information that isn't there. I think maybe we touched on earlier in regards to information being taken in private, excluding the public. I think that should be the whole, to get a proper discussion about this. We need to take this paper, exclude the public and take it in private, so we're going to have a full debate about this. The figures, the indemnity letters, it's fundamental. We need to understand that. We need to be able to ask the sensitive questions around about the financial side, around about them as well. How does that apply? And it's not just now, if we're that much over budget and over time as it stands, when we do finally get this into place, can we hope to get the help of Zero Waste Scotland? That might make it be a big benefit. It might know, we don't know. Maybe that's a question I'll leave out there, hopefully get answered after this. A little bit of a rant. Will Zero Waste support us as we go forward? And as far as Scottish Government's concerned, because we have got a target, so we're ambitious council, but we do want to meet our targets, but therefore we just want to make sure that we can comply and meet our statutory duties as best we can, but we've had a lot, as this paper's outlined, there's a lot of complicated circumstances in there that's held us back, but I still don't understand why it's took nearly 18 months after the fact, when I thought it should have been well on its way to being implemented. We're getting told, do you know, we've really got a problem here. It's finance, it's labour, there's a resource, there's a whole load of problems there. I think it should have been in front, even if it was at a group level, to get a better understanding. So I suppose after that rant, I think the point I would like to make in particular is, we do need a further paper. I'm inclined, I should say, to take on board what Councillor Dick's saying, and I agree with him. We need better reporting, but I think we should exclude the public, and I'd like to hear from Zero Waste Scotland exactly what they're thinking. Will we get Scottish Government supporting this? Because we absolutely need it to implement this. We do.
A couple of points here. Obviously, the PFI side of things would be taken in private. I think everything else should be in the public domain. I don't think there's, public have got an interest in this issue, but obviously when it comes to detailed negotiations around the contract variation, then obviously that'll have to be taken in private. But I think everything else will certainly be discussed in public. I think that's one of the reasons why the reports are effectively broken down into more than one, to minimise those that have to be taken in private. And I think we'll hear from Zero Waste Scotland in a second. I'm going to bring Jensen in a second, but I'll bring Alistair in just now.
Thank you, Chair. And just in answer to some of Councillor Culler's points, just to be absolutely clear, what you have in front of you is the budget orientated to the collection system. There is no cross-fertilisation or whatever from PFI budgets. What we're looking at here is the overspend associated with the collection system only. The issues on the indemnity letter and on future variations of the contract to accommodate this new collection system are quite separate from a budget point of view. And these will be detailed to members in the future.
I mean, if we can't get that indemnity sorted out, we can't deliver the service. It's as simple as that, and that's the point I'm making.
Ian, do you want to...
Chair, but sorry, if you didn't mind, just a pick up on something that Ian said there, and it's part of the same. He talked about the rollout and questions over that. There are many questions to be answered on that basis. And I can guarantee one thing. Even although this decision wasn't in our watch, I can say that in our watch, this won't be rolled out to anywhere else at the moment, but till further information came to us. So I can give you that guarantee, not in my watch anyway.
Okay, and do you want to clarify the paragraph you were referring to? We'll answer that question.
Thanks, Chair. It's 3.2.5. Formal project management approach has been agreed with ZWS, progress, development, implementation, and so on. My point is, I thought project boards that we set up for capital projects, why does it actually need the agreement of Zero Waste Scotland? I think from practical implementation, I can accept that. But it's the fact that we're now agreeing a formal project management approach. And what was there before?
Chair, just in answer to that question, that we have had a project management board in place to deal with this. We've had a programme board, and that's all dealt with the pillars that have been involved in pulling this project together. There are 4 pillars. There's the infrastructure that we needed through our Zero Waste Park investment, and that had its own programme board, project board. There's the communications package that we had to put together for all residents, and that's had its own group meeting to discuss that. There's the contract waste PFI variations, and that's had its own project board to discuss that. And there's finally the implementation and rollout of the collection service itself. And my colleagues, I'll speak to the programme board that was in position for that. Overarching that, there's been an executive board chaired by myself that has overseen each of these pillars that support the full project. And what we're referring to is here is to ensure that going forward we have the correct approach with the fullest support from Zero Waste Scotland.
Okay, Ian.
Thanks, Chair. I think that maybe gets to some of the heart of the matter. My understanding of formal project management boards, which I thought it was what was running it before, is that it's chaired by somebody other than the operations manager. Because otherwise, how can you challenge what the operations director or manager, yourself, whatever, is doing? And that's where part of my concern lies, because I did think that project management did have that independence of chairing.
Okay, I'm going to bring gents from Zero Waste Scotland in. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to come in Address Committee today. Can I just ask if you can maybe outline, given some of the concerns members have raised, what support you've already provided to the council in terms of the role of this scheme, and in particular, in light of what Councillor Dick says about future support, what sort of future support do you think you can provide in taking this forward?
Okay, thanks, Chair. I suppose in terms of sort of summing up the initial support that's been given to council, really in terms of capital, they really bring the equipment and vehicles that are required to sort of roll out the chosen system was there. Also in terms of some major service change support, which was basically funding the project manager to work with the council to help to roll these new facilities out and services out. And really in terms of communication support as well. So once the systems are in place to communicate and help the council to communicate with householders in a fairly uniform way that would sort of so encourage participation and sort of minimise contamination issues, etc. That sort of kind of gives you an idea of where we are in terms of the first part of the support we're given. In terms of taking things forward, I mean, from our point of view, is it would be ideal for us to sort of help the council to identify where the issues that currently got are, and we have offered some initial support to try and sort of, as I say, try and build up a picture of what the kind of detailed support will be required for that. But I think it's quite important is that Zero Waste Scotland's not a commissioning body as such. Our job is to help the council to basically bring these projects to life as such. So it would really be in terms of the council to take that forward with some limited support from us, but really for the council to own the project and take everything forward to basically, I suppose, bring the resolve as many issues as you can and roll out, obviously complete the rollout to the rest of the area whenever that's actually possible.
Okay, I've got Alistair next.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I would go back to the sort of clause 3 of the third part of the proposed motion, and I would have to say, without being disloyal to my colleagues, that whether certainly, in my opinion, will be and should be a role and a locus for our external auditors, I would stress, sir, that should be determined robustly and in detail at the appropriate future time. I think there's a danger, in fact, that if we adopt something like this at the moment, the outcomes that you'll get from any such referral will be may not, in fact, Chair, be what we're looking for. And I would base part of my reasoning on that, sir, by saying that I and colleagues attended a meeting of the Audit and Risk Management Committee last Thursday, and there was one of the reports, item number 5 on the agenda, was a report from our external water auditors, PricewaterhouseCoopers, in relation to various aspects of Dunmuir Park. Now, I would have to say that I personally felt that the terms of that report were not, in fact, what I had anticipated and what I had been looking for, and I rather suspect that it was because we did not spell out in sufficiently robustly, Chair, and in sufficient detail just exactly what we were looking for. So, I'm a bit uneasy in relation to that proposal at this stage. I think perhaps we should be holding fire, and then, as I've said earlier, Chair, beefing it up and being as robust as we possibly can at the appropriate time. I would also like to say to you, sir, that as far as I'm concerned, if necessary, while this committee has primary responsibility, as it were, to carry out robust scrutiny of what's taking place here, I think there's also a locus and a role for the full council if need be. And let me say to you, Chair, well, Ian Dick, to be fair to him, has been measured. I would like to think that I will retain that, but there are various facets of this report which is before us today, Chair, which, quite frankly, my view, are a little short of disgraceful. I think the degree of ineptitude that's displayed in certain aspects, for instance, getting vehicles, sort of total, it would seem to me, a total abnegation of our responsibility from a health and safety perspective, etc. That simply isn't acceptable. And I think, quite frankly, Chair, we're going to have to get to the bottom of that and carry out as rigorous an assessment as possible. This is a shocking state of affairs. And ultimately, the buck stops with us as elected members. And I'm prepared to face up to that. But let me tell you, sir, I am not prepared, in facing up to it, and I'm sure other members will as well, to tolerate any manifestation of a Teflon culture elsewhere in the organisation. We want to get to the bottom of this, find out just what has happened and why. Chair, along with Graham Nicholl and Jim McComb, I did the Mid-Galloway Community Council circuit,
at the time we were talking about this. And there were concerns expressed, and along with other Wigan Wigtonshire members, we had at least one briefing session about, how things were going along the route. And what I would have to say to you, Chair, is that certainly the apprehensions and certainly the concerns which were articulated at these meetings are resonating today in the body of this report. And I really find this, as I say, sir, an unacceptable, it's a damning indictment. It's an unacceptable state of affairs. I'll leave it at that, Chair, and I'm grateful, as always, for your forbearance.
Very much, Alistair. Do you want back in, Ian? Did you put your name here?
Aye, if that's okay, if it's just obviously in turn. I suppose, what's going through, hearing other people, just what's going through my mind, Chairman, is what is the actual answer to this? What is the solution? I do think we should concentrate on that very much so as well. What is the answer? I heard what Zero Waste Scotland in as far as what their roles and responsibilities, you could say, and how they would help us. I just think we need something bigger and better almost. I would really like to know what is Scottish Government thinking about this, because we're unique as far as I'm aware across Scotland. We did commission an eco-deco type of waste process. We commissioned that, we got it in, got it working, and all of a sudden a directive came out for Europe and we had to change our processes. That was quite explicit within the legislation that came forward. I've almost felt pointed at Dumfries and Galloway. So even then you've got to beg the questions begged to say, where else can we compare ourselves across Scotland? We are unique. We find ourselves in a very precarious situation. So what's the solution? How do we get out of this? Have we got to flog it to death with a bag of money, or would you sit and be ridiculed by the public as members? We've got to get to grips with this. So what do we do? What is the solution here, Chairman? And for instance, we do need timelines. We can't. It's open-ended. Go back to the point. When we get to recommendations, we need fixed timelines to come back to the actual reporting mechanism.
Thanks for that, Ian. Do you have any other members? Obviously, I think one of the points to highlight, if you look at section 4 of the report, it outlines there effectively an action plan. Now, I'm keen to get members' views on whether or not you think the action plan covers obviously a number of the concerns we've got, but there's quite clearly set out there that what we're looking to achieve is to basically progress that action plan as set out in section 4. Does that cover the types of actions that members are actually looking for? I think is one thing I would certainly be looking for some feedback on. I think if you look at maybe we can take it in terms of the recommendations. Obviously, recommendation 1 is to consider the outcomes of the report, which members have obviously done in terms of detail there. But the second one is around the action plan itself. And then recommendation 2.21 is seeking a costing model for the scheme within Wigtonshire. Now, effectively in that costing model, we need to have a more detailed breakdown, I think, of some of the costs, bearing in mind what Ian said earlier. I think it's really important to look exactly what those costs are in terms of the one-off things that I mentioned earlier. What are the additional costs that have came along since the budget was set? And I take account, for example, changes the Scottish Government have made that couldn't have been foreseen when members agreed it in November 2012. So what part of those costs are additional burdens that have been placed on us? And what are those costs that, frankly, as a result of the fact that it's simply over budget and are recurring, and we need to have a breakdown of detail on that, and obviously, more importantly, within the action plan, actually have actions that will bring those costs back under control. Is that the type of things that members are looking for? So, and we want a detail on that. Okay, so, I think, Claire, have you got a note of that? I'm going to come to the charter in a second because I'm quite keen to get some feedback on the charter as well, because this is we're dealing here with the rollout of a scheme that was agreed several years ago, but there's a lot more coming. I have to say to members, I attended a meeting at COSLA Development Committee recently, and we discussed the charter. The leaders been at meetings in which the charter has been discussed as well. There are major implications on this council and other councils across Scotland of the charter, so I want to spend a wee bit of time discussing that as well today. But before I move on to that, Ian, do you want to come back on any of the points on?
But just a question, actually, about what the consideration was given to the model that we rolled out. My understanding was Highland Council restricted this zero waste model to Inverness. Did we give any consideration at any point to simply rolling it out in the major urban areas such as Stranraer, Stewart, CD, Dalbeattie, Dumfries, Annan? Was that considered at all? And can it still be considered if, as is pointed out in here, we have an unsustainable financial model?
Yeah, that was certainly one of the options that was presented to members in November 2012. And members appreciate there was no members of Labour group at that meeting for reasons I won't go into, which was totally unacceptable. However, you know, the members who took that decision, previous administration who took that decision, were given a series of options put before you, and you chose this option. Now, as part of the review, it may very well be you may wish to change your mind, I don't know, but there were a number of options put before members in November 2012, and this is the option that you chose. Okay, can we, so in terms of the costings and the model going forward, are members happy that we've actually covered, Finlay?
Sorry, Chair, I'm sitting here and I'm a bit reluctant to speak up because there's just so much has gone wrong with this. And it looks like most of the recommendations are looking at how we can make things better from where we are at the moment. What we seriously need to look at is how we got ourselves in this terrible mess. And the public want to know how a scheme that was supposed to be cost neutral to the council has turned into this debacle. We've got a report here from the Keele Centre where every decision that appears to be made by this department has gone wrong, whether it's the design and layout of the vehicles, whether it's the gloves, whether it's the collection boxes. I was led to believe that this council was one of the last to do curbside separation, and we were looking at councils right across not only Scotland, but across the whole of the UK. So how on earth have we got into this mess? I think we're all sitting here sort of gobsmacked, and the general public are wondering how on earth we've got to this position. So today, we may be looking at how we've moved from where we are to improve things, but we need to look back and find out where these decisions were made on a scheme that was supposed to be cost neutral and end up putting this council at risk.
Disagree. Okay. In terms of going back to 2.21, in terms of the costing model, we'll come to your point in a second, Finlay, just if there's any way we wish to consider that's part of the recommendations. But in terms of the costings, are members happy that we're going to cover the information that you're looking for? Yeah. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Okay, in terms of 2.22, options to be considered for the rollout of the source separated collection service to the rest of the region. So the next part we're being asked to consider is bringing a report on options for the potential rollout. Now, the leader's obviously made it absolutely clear in his watch there'll be no rollout until these costings are dealt with. But the members happy for that recommendation to be agreed? Is there anything you wish to add to that particular recommendation? I'm obviously looking at your motion, Ian, if there's anything there, but I don't see anything in that particular recommendation. Finlay?
I presume this is that will include implications on the PFI and the deal we've already got, because that's obviously, in the moment, the kind of elephant in the room. Any decision we've taken has got to be taken in hand with what's going to happen with the ongoing contract we've got.
I think if you look at 4.1 in the report, I think it covers that, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're very clear on that. Okay, the next item is the next recommendation refers to 2.23, and it's effectively asking us to obviously look at the implications for the Charter for Household Recycling in Scotland and the associated Code of Practice currently being developed by the Scottish Government. Again, I'm going to bring in maybe Zero Waste Scotland, maybe just explain to members the background behind this and what are the implications for the council, because I think members kind of get sort of mixed messages that effectively what we're looking at is a standard scheme right across Scotland for all local authorities, but then when you discuss it, and I certainly discussed it at COSLA, we're being told there'll be a lot of flexibility, there won't be a one size fits all. So, what exactly, before members here start taking decisions on, either not rolling things out across our region, what exactly will the code mean for Dumfries and Galloway?
Okay, I can maybe provide some answers to that. So the Charter for Household Recycling was approved in principle by COSLA leaders at the end of August, and the plan is to take the Code of Practice back to COSLA leaders sometime before the end of the year. Within the Code of Practice, there'll be guidance that will cover how services are designed, so that touches on some of the things you mentioned there around greater degrees of consistency in the way that the collection services are operated. It will cover the policies that councils use across Scotland to support recycling services and reductions in residual waste. It will consider how services are operated, the levels of supervision and such like.
and also how citizens are communicated with. So that's the four broad chapters that the Code of Practice has been worked along. There's still a lot of decisions to be made, and it's very much in the drafting stage just now. So what you've mentioned specifically there around the levels of consistency, I think the aspiration is that we have a few collection systems, not 32 collection systems that we kind of roughly have just now. How close we get to that being one system across the whole of Scotland, I just don't know the answer to that. I'm not even sure that's an appropriate aspiration to have anyway. But that's the sort of direction of travel that Code of Practice is moving towards. I think it's worth noting that even when the Charter and the Code of Practice are completed, that they are voluntary and councils are invited to sign up to those on a voluntary basis. So there'll be no mandate to do so for any council.
That's helpful. So, 'cause I suppose my concern is that we spend time and a great deal of money rolling out a scheme, either a current scheme or a scheme very similar to it, across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway, and then in a year or so's time, Scottish Government yourselves come along and say, actually, because of the Code of Practice, etc., that's not a scheme that we're going to allow. Is that likely to happen? Or is there other schemes out there that may be more appropriate to what we're doing in Dumfries and Galloway that would meet the Code of Practice better than we're doing, notwithstanding the concerns that members have raised today?
I'll take your second point. I think it's probably too early to give you a steer on exactly what the service design is going to come out with. So I think we just need to wait and see for that. Your first point, I think, is absolutely a possibility, and it's a possibility that has to be factored into all councils across Scotland. There's a number of councils that are at some stage in rolling out either a change to the recycling service or a new recycling service. I think there's an expectation, however, that once a council chooses to sign up for the Code of Practice or the Charter and the Code of Practice associated to it, that there's a long transition period. It's not like you sign it one day and a year later you're expected to have fully implemented everything that's within that Code of Practice and Charter. There'll be a sensible transition plan from A to B, and for each council that will be different. For some it will be something that can happen quite quickly, and for some it might take 5, 7, even 10 years to implement that, and I think that will be given due and appropriate consideration.
I suppose the challenge we've got is that we haven't rolled out a recycling scheme across Dumfries and Galloway at the moment, so common sense would suggest, well, don't roll it out until you know exactly what the implications are for the Code of Practice. Or are you suggesting that actually we should roll it out and then we might be given 10 years to change it? I mean, that doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
And until the Charter and the Code of Practice are completed, it's difficult to tell, but every council is in a similar quandary, that they're all wondering what it's going to say and what the implications are for them. And some are in the process of rolling out, or the tail end of the rollout, and are naturally worried about what the implications are, because the public, I suppose, doesn't really care whether the Charter's driving this or not. They're just going to see changes to services, and nobody really likes change.
I suppose if ultimately this council decides, well, let's be honest, we're not in a hurry to roll this out at the moment anyway, for a number of reasons. But if this council decides they're not rolling things out because of the code that's likely to come in and really understanding the full implications of that, what effectively is the punishment for the council? Because obviously I appreciate our recycling figures won't be through the roof anytime soon. And certainly the more delays we have, then they're not going to improve. So what's effectively the punishment? Because obviously there are timelines here around government regulations, etc. So we're kind of stuck in the middle between a Code of Practice, we don't really know what it's going to mean, and trying to roll out a scheme. So what are the implications for the council pausing and not moving forward on the back of the waiting for the Code of Practice?
Not really something for Zero Waste Scotland to comment on, given that it would be the Scottish Government that would have to give you a steer on that. I believe officers are meeting with Scottish Government this week to discuss what the implications are just on the current rollout as been discussed today, because there are implications of not having food waste rolled out by 2016. Dry recycling services were due to be rolled out under the regulations in 2014. So I think there'll be discussions to be had with government, and I think part of that will be what are the implications of the charter, and is it appropriate to factor that into any delays that you might want to consider.
Okay, I don't know if other members want to bring in any. So, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on the issue of the code of practice. I think it's absolutely imperative, sir, that this authority treats it with a due degree of scepticism, which, as far as I'm concerned, it warrants. Last meeting of this committee, we considered a report on trunk roads management, and I think during the part of that discussion, reference was made to the fact that we might finish up with the One Roads Authority in that for Scotland in that regard. And if you look at paragraph 3.7.2 of this report, the major benefits from a common approach would be the opportunity for consistent communications to householders across Scotland, efficiencies from joint services, and better prices from the recycling industry for a consistent quality of material. In the face of it, that's all well and good, but maybe the more cynical among us would say, what's the inference here? We talk about a waste or a single refuse collection authority for the country as well. I think, that's the background, that's the scenario, sir, within which we've got to operate, and we should be looking at what meets the needs and best serves the people of Dumfries and Galloway. If we're getting the opportunity to do that, we've got to take it with both hands, Chair. And the point you're making you made earlier on, there's no point, as it were, in diving in at the moment before we really know just exactly what's being proposed. But I think we treat what is being proposed with as healthy a degree of scepticism as possible, and we'll look at whether or not it's in our interest to go down whichever particular route, and we choose that. And and that's imperative as far as I'm concerned. We're already in a mess here. We've got to extricate ourselves and then make sure, in fact, that we go forward in a sustainable and an acceptable fashion.
Okay, thanks very much. Point well made, Alistair. Okay, can I go back then to the recommendations in terms of the action plan? Sorry, Jeff. Sorry, I keep.
Yeah, I agree with Alistair. I don't think it's our duty as a council to try and pin down the Scottish Government. It ducks and dives all over the place. I mean, we've got our fingers burnt with the Eco-Deco plan to a large extent. The target there was diversions from landfill. In all honesty, we went down that route, we hit that target, and then suddenly the targets changed yet again. And I've got no confidence in what I've just been told in terms of what the Scottish Government's going to come out with in some time in the future. It's not our job to try and set the government policy. It's the government to actually detail what it wants, when it wants, and set the targets in stone.
I wouldn't disagree with any of that, Jeff. Okay, can we come back to 2.23? The Charter, obviously, the implications for the Charter will form part of the report back to members. Is there anything any member wants to add to that, notwithstanding we don't know the full implications yet? Okay, can we look at 2.24? One of the issues highlighted is obviously the commercial waste service and the impact on that of the changes that have been made. So contained within the recommendation is a review of commercial waste services and options for its integration with the new household waste and recycling collection service. Are members happy with that to be included as part of the report? Jeff?
Just on the back of that, on 3.5.3, it says that the following the introduction of the Waste Scotland regulations, dedicated commercial waste vehicles have been required to provide this service. What's the background to that? What's the logic behind it?
Chair, if I can just simply explain the problem, and if you wish more detail, my colleagues will help. But in rolling out this new collection service, we moved to 2 weekly collections of residual waste. So we collect the wheeled bin, that's all the waste that we don't recycle, every fortnight. Now, in the past, our RCV vehicles have collected household and commercial waste together, sometimes in the same round. Now, commercial customers demand a weekly service. In some cases, sometimes they demand a 3-day service in 1 week. So it's that interface of our fortnightly collections with commercial collections that may be in a more demand-led basis. That is the issue we have to consider. That's it, simply. My colleagues can add any further detail.
Jeff?
Are we obligated to provide a service when the customer requires it for a commercial waste? I mean, if somebody wants a 3-day service, then There are commercial companies who can provide that.
We are required under the Act, if asked, to provide the service, and we are able to make the appropriate charge.
Friendly. And then Jim.
So from what you say, can I take it that domestic and commercial waste would be delivered to the Eco Deco in the same lorry? They were delivered together, collected together, mixed up and delivered as a mixed waste, commercial and domestic?
Yes, in the past that certainly has been the case. All the waste is in one vehicle when delivered. And in the future, where RCVs do the same thing, that would still be the case, yes.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just to come back on something the director's just said, that regarding commercial waste, we are allowed to apply the appropriate charge. We're reading this report, we're no, because commercial waste losing money. If it is not a statutory duty, should we be in it at all? That's not one of the actual options that were being looked at under 4.3.
Chair, that is why we're suggesting to do a full review of it and a full review of our charges and our obligations under the various acts. There's commercial waste now on three fronts. There's the residual commercial waste, there's the food waste aspect, and there's the dry recycler aspects. So this is not just a one bin issue, this is an issue across these three waste streams. And that's something we have to consider very carefully.
Just very quickly, so under our waste PFI contract, we were allowed to deliver both household and commercial waste to the Eco Deco? We were.
Sorry, Jim, did you want to come back in? Sorry.
Yeah, I understand that there's three waste streams, but if it's commercial waste, is that collection of commercial waste actually a statutory obligation, whether it's one waste stream or three waste streams? And if we're not making money at it, should we actually be in it?
My understanding, we'll clarify this, is one of the areas that we need to clarify. When asked by a customer, under the terms of the Act, we are required to collect that waste and charge an appropriate charge. That is my understanding.
On this point, Ronnie?
Yeah, just on that point. So the requirement is that we've got, if asked, we say this is our service. If we charge them £1, we can charge them £10. And if they want to take that service, they can't take that service. If they don't want to take that service, then they find it elsewhere.
Absolutely. It certainly has external market forces, and the customer has that choice.
Ian?
Now, we were fortunate we had a couple of the officers in at a group level, and it was the same. We came up with the same point, and it's a commercial viability. And to me, it's not so much whether it's a statutory duty. If it is, then fair enough. But then what Ronnie said, you charge the appropriate charge. But there's commercial providers in this area that can provide that at a more competitive price than the council, and it should we have our toe in the other row, and that's ultimately the question, I think, and that's what needs to come back in that report, because we're not charging the appropriate price, the appropriate charge, and that's evident through the report.
There's the wider aspects, also the local economy, the support of business. We have a responsibility through our regional economic strategy to support businesses, and we need to look at that very carefully. We're also an enterprising council, and we have a new enterprising council arm within EEI, and we want to look at the opportunities of developing a business that will be successful, support the economy, and support the businesses in the region.
And I think on the other side, of course, what used to happen is the commercial waste side of things actually made a substantial income for the council. It made a substantial profit, and that allowed the costs of other work to be reduced as well. So it swings and roundabouts. But presumably these issues will be brought back to us as part of the review of the commercial waste services. I think members are quite clear they want to look at all options around the commercial waste service as part of that review. Okay, in terms of 2.25, including refuge and recycling services, collections, operational policy and procedures to define the new source separate collection services. Do you want to elaborate on that, Alistair, just what that's likely to look like in terms of the report?
Well, this will be a document that asks members to agree our operations policy for our new recycling collections. I think there is a document that was presented to the DG First Management Committee some time ago, and that obviously needs updated in line with what we're doing in Wigtown and potentially over the rest of the region, but it also needs to be updated to take cognizance of the Code of Practice and Charter. So there's a bit of updating to do with that, and it needs to align with what we come back on in the review of the Wigtown collection system and what we're proposing for the future and what we're proposing for commercial collection.
Okay, members happy with that? Alistair and then Ian.
Yes, I'm happy with it, sir, but I would have to say that looking at paragraph 3.6.6 on page 9 of the report, I must admit I swallowed hard, when reading that. You're talking about private road end policy and restricted public road access. That, these are issues which, could have very significant, implications for this council as well. But in the principle, sir, yes, I'm happy that we bring forward or bring back the relevant operational policies for approval by the elected members of this committee.
That's the exact point I was going to bring up, Chairman, that, and obviously the collection where you've got elderly and vulnerable people where they need it collected from their back doors. So that's just make sure that was part of that policy if possible.
Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, Chair, thanks for letting me back in again. I hear what you're saying about the decision that we made on November 2012 regarding the policy that we were going to bring in. But from my memory, we were not actually told that there were exceptions within this for rural properties. We weren't told that there was an exception regarding the dry recycling. We weren't told that there was exceptions about food recycling. We weren't actually told that actually existed within the legislation, and it does.
Again, I'll be corrected by colleagues, but as far as dry recycle is concerned, there is a requirement to collect it across the piece. There are no derogations for dry recycling, and my colleagues from Zero Waste are agreeing with that. There are derogations for food waste, and that's based on a postcode system, but members agreed to collect across the piece on food waste so that each of our customers received the same service. And we did not have an issue with, in some cases, towns, larger towns, having a fortnightly collection of residual waste and rural areas having a weekly collection. We tried to present it at that time, if I recall correctly, to make it as a simple a change as possible across the piece.
Okay, I've got Alistair, Jim and Ian.
Chair, can I say that again, in a mid-Galloway context, that the possibility of applying for and obtaining appropriate derogations to deal with the more rural aspects of that part of Dumfries and Galloway was floated by the 3 mid-Galloway members, and quite frankly, it found no favour. And it was also floated by various community representatives, as I've already alluded, Chair, when we went in circuit, to the sort of community council meetings. So to say that, we were aware, certainly in a mid-Galloway context, about the ability and appropriate circumstances to seek derogations. And I think the conclusion that we certainly came to was that this was being pursued, almost in the fashion of latter-day zealots.
Jim and then Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't like to be a stickler. The legislation, subsection 2, an authority must, from the 1st of January 2014, arrange for there to be provided to every occupier of every domestic property in its area such receptacles as will enable the separate collection of dry recyclable waste from the property. Subsection 3, an authority need not arrange for a receptacle to be provided under subsection 2 if the property is in a rural area and the authority considers that the separate collection of dry recyclable waste from the property would not be environmentally or economically practicable. That means there is a derogation under the Act for dry recyclables.
On the same point, Ian, yeah.
It was, I mean, I remember there was choices, and that was one of the choices we had, is that the rural could have been left alone. But it was made quite clear to us, or the argument that was put forward to us at the time was that because of the routes, the movements with the vehicles, the RCVs and such like, that to try and impose two separate types of collections wasn't feasible. The costs made it very difficult and unworkable, and that's why the decision was made fundamentally. That's certainly my recollection, but the rural locations could have been ruled out. It's only a larger, I can't remember, 12, 14, something like that within Dumfries and Galloway, but we could have had to be imposed on. The rest of the smaller settlements could have been excluded. I think that was referred to earlier. Is that still an option? But we could come back to as part of this review as it comes forward. So just for, I mean, Jim's right, exactly. He's read it for statute. He's absolutely right in what he's saying, but the advice certainly what we were given at the time, and I remember quite clearly the reason we made that decision was because of the advice we were given in regards to the extra financial strain that would be put on for the sake of trying to change the routes because of the one type of vehicle and using another type of vehicle, because there are obviously two different types. So it was given there, but for feasibility reasons it was ruled out.
All right, thank you, Chair. I acknowledge Councillor McClung's point, but we did advise in that paper that the system that we were recommending was environmentally and was economically viable, and therefore that's why we recommended it.
Jim?
Yeah, Chair. Thanks for your forbearance again. Yes, I realise that maybe my memory was incorrect in what we were advised. I was replying in reply to the Director's comment that there was no derogation for dry recyclable waste. That's why I read the legislation.
Okay, well, presumably if there is, then that's an option as part of the review that can come forward. Members took a decision at the time to pursue the scheme that you took, and obviously if there are options, notwithstanding if you don't collect food for several weeks, then there's obviously implications around that, but obviously these things can be looked at as part of the potential options. Graham?
Thank you, Chair. We took the advice of the department at the time. We were given figures at the time. Unfortunately, we're now, however long it is down the road, and we're looking at a black hole of £435,000 to lift approximately 20% of the household waste in Dumfries and Galloway. That black hole, if you multiply that up, is certainly in excess of £2 million, which is certainly going to affect our budget as a council of Dumfries and Galloway. And I think we really need to have a second look at this with all the options put on the table. I fully back what the leader has said today, that he'll not roll it out until we get this sorted out. But we have found ourselves in quite a horrible position. And until we get the full figures and we can deal with it, and supposing it's a private meeting, a meeting behind closed doors, so we can deal with it with all the detail that we can get, I think we should be really treading very carefully. And my worry is, a bit like yourself, Chair, that we go down a road and maybe roll this out over a period of time, and then the Scottish Government tell us it's all wrong. Now, we don't know our luck. They might come back and say that they want to build a whole lot of eco-deco plants across Scotland, but that would be pushing our luck a wee bit too far, maybe. But I think they maybe should take another look at that. But that's my advice to them.
Pass that on, Graham. Pass that on, and don't hold your breath that there'll be a change on there. Okay, I think we've covered 2.25, unless members have got anything they want to add to that. Can we look at, obviously, the other issue that members have raised? It's not on the report today, but obviously we'll have to come forward, and that's 2.26, 2.27 and 2.28. So effectively, the financial implications on the PFI of any changes. Now, Director will keep me right, and Claire will keep me right as well, but I'm assuming that particular part of any future reports will obviously have to be taken in private, but I'm very keen that the rest is taken in public, because I think people need to hear the arguments we're making, but I think those parts will obviously have to be taken in private. Can I just ask members, though, in terms of the recommendations, are you happy that 2.26, 2.27, 2.28 include all the information that you would be looking for within that particular report. Yeah, okay.
I think just make a point about timeline, Chairman, in regards to that, because obviously that's...
Absolutely. I'm going to ask the Director now, because obviously we've delayed discussing this report until today, which obviously means we've lost 2 weeks, and the next meeting of the committee is June the 10th of November. So I'm anticipating that all these reports probably won't be written in time for the 10th of November. So can I just ask the Director if he can just give members an indication as to when we can expect to see all these reports, either November or certainly January, I would have thought, at the very, very latest, if those that can't be ready for November.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to the debate and listening to members' desires to get every piece of detail that can be discussed on this, I would suggest that we need until January to come back with all the collection information. But on the PFI issues, I think it's important that members receive an update on that at the November committee.
Okay, so effectively 2.26, 7 and 8 in November, and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 in the reports that come to committee in January. I'll bring in Alistair, Ian and then Finlay.
Thanks very much indeed, sir. Given, that a number of members have alluded, rightly in my opinion, Chair, to the potential implications of this, on the Council's budget going forward, are we satisfied that, January's time enough? I would have thought if we could do it, sir, before then, and, sort of try to mitigate any possible impacts on next year's budget, I think it's imperative that we should seek to achieve that objective, Chair. That'd be my comment.
I asked Paul if he wants to make any comments on the budget side of things. Obviously, there was funding set aside around budget pressures, and also because we've not rolled the scheme out to other parts of the region, there was obviously funding within the sinking fund to cover a lot of these costs. But I'll ask Paul to say a few words on that.
I think under normal circumstances, I say a delay until January is problematic. One thing I would say is that for the current year, in terms of when we're likely to get an indication of Scottish Government funding, it's being pushed back because the UK spending review is not coming out till the end of November now. It's likely to be into January before we actually get information on a local government finance settlement for the upcoming period. So I think as long as the information that comes to members in January is sufficient to allow us to get a firm handle on the position and what we're going to do going forward, I think that's acceptable.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just briefly to say, sir, I'll accept that.
Okay, I think did I have Ian and then, sorry, Ian and then Finlay.
Yeah, just to going back to the motion I placed at the beginning of this meeting, Chair, I'd be quite happy to leave 3 out at this point, particularly in view of a number of things I've said. I am adamant, though, that I want to hear from Zero Waste Scotland and a root and branch review of the current delivery and potential rollout. And the reason I ask that is because the terms of the letter to our Chief Executive in January this year were quite frankly quite damning. And the minutes of the subsequent meeting held between this Council and Zero Waste Scotland in February bear that out. Now, I think it's absolutely vital that this committee and this Council knows what Zero Waste Scotland thinks of what we've done so far and what is likely to happen in future. So I would ask then that added to the recommendations are 1 and 2, and I'm quite content to leave 3 at the moment.
We've covered 2 already. I think members have been quite clear what the costed options are, and it's in the report 2.21 and 2.22, unless there's anything you want to add to that. And I think I also outlined a breakdown of the costs around what are recurring, what are one-offs, and what are a result of changes by the Scottish Government since we agreed the position in 2012. So I think that's been covered. But in terms of the first one, I think the gentleman from Zero Waste Scotland said it wasn't their role to review our services, but they would provide support in order for that review to take place. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that in terms of how you would actually go about providing that support in order for a review of what's been delivered so far.
Certainly would do that. I mean, in terms of the, I suppose in the first instance is to bring somebody on board, which were mutually agreeable to ourselves and the Council to give an independent view and to help the Council cover the cost of that in the first instance. So really, I think that's as far as we could go at the moment until we get a bit more detail on what the issues are and how we resolve them to try and possibly bring somebody in from I suppose for a more detailed review in terms of going into real nuts and bolts of everything.
Want Want to come back on that, Ian?
Yeah, the problem for me is that what was said at the beginning of the year to our Chief Executive in the subsequent meeting that was held were never put before members. And quite frankly, that's the kind of thing there that I think we should have needed to have known in January. And I think it would be very helpful for such a statement about their opinion to councillors.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I can understand where Councillor Rick's coming from. One of the things I would like to know, and we seem to have kind of wandered off the main point of this as far as I'm concerned, we're 435,000 over budget in 8 months to the end of the financial year. I would like to know how we got there. Now, the report does explain some of that, but 3.4.2 in the report and also page 47 in the Keel report makes it quite clear, in my view, that the vehicles that we got aren't suitable and the boxes that we got aren't suitable. I would like to know who actually decided on those boxes and vehicles, and what advice did they take as to which vehicles and which boxes to actually buy, because it would appear for the Keel report that the problem with the boxes, at least, would have been solved if we had actually bought the trolley boxes and the trolleys for everybody, because they're saying that the trolley boxes actually work fine.
Okay. Everything that we procured was through a national procurement system, and the companies that we used were nationally approved. And the boxes and receptacles, we know that the company that provided these have provided something like 14 million of them throughout the UK. So yes, we did follow the correct procedures, but again, in the review, we will come back with the detail and answering these questions that members have raised.
Okay, I've got Finlay and then Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. I hope you don't mind, I'm kind of jumping back, but I want to be assured that every option's looked at in the review, for considering the separate collection rollout. So that may actually involve us just stopping it altogether, and what the financial and legal implications of that would be, whether that was repaying grants, and what the legal implications would be of not actually adhering to some of the legislation. You know, that was an option we were told wasn't on the table back in 2012, but with the frightening figures we're looking at rolling this out, I would like every option looked at, and that would be potentially looking at not using these vehicles, not rolling out the separation, returning grants, whatever. I think we need to be having all the options on the table so members can make a decision on things like that as well.
Everyone here certainly should know what the Waste Scotland Regulations 2012 tell us, and why we're in this position that we are today, in terms of the fact that we went down a particular scheme. It was as a result of regulations brought in, and the regulations are relatively clear. So I don't think an option of doing nothing and not recycling is actually an option we can take. I would just simply advise members to go and read the regulations and read the advice that's come from Scottish Government. I appreciate it's different, two sides of the border, but I'm sure in the report we can touch on what the implications would be of breaking those regulations. But I would just advise members to read those regulations and before pursuing a particular route like that. Okay, I've got Alistair.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just going back to the point that Mr. Speedy made, about sort of the process that we followed in getting this equipment, for want of a better term. Well, that's as may be, but manifestly they're no fit for purpose. I mean, if you read the ergonomic review of the curbside refuse collection, which has been produced for us by the Keel Centre, that's an absolutely damning indictment, Chair. And quite frankly, if in fact, we've left ourselves open, as it would appear that we have, albeit we followed the recognised processes, it's about time that we started asking questions of those that recommended the processes to us. And if need be, Chair, we start looking for restitution. Because if this is going to cost us an arm and a leg by following what was presumably deemed to be accepted best practice, I think, personally speaking, that I would be going knocking on their door and saying, just a minute, what are you going to do then to make restitution to us?
I wouldn't disagree with the point, Alistair. Obviously, I think that the time to do that is when we look at the options and the changes that we're going to make and the extent to which we'll have to change things. And and it certainly may come out at that particular point, or it should come out at that particular point. Okay, can we look at 2.3? I'll come back to certainly the point Ian made regarding. I think we've got a clear indication from gentlemen from Zero Waste Scotland as to the support they're going to provide. And we'll come back to your actual wording shortly, Ian, to see whether that covers it all. But can I just look at finally 2.3, because we haven't discussed it yet, but there's obviously been a suggestion that we bring in a pilot scheme in relation to rural road end collections, and whether the council continues with the current policy in Wigtown, or whether you wish to pursue that at this particular time. Now, the reality is that, frankly, you don't have to know a great deal about these things not to know that that's going to add significant cost to the scheme already. And personally, I'm not of the view that at this moment in time we should be pursuing things that are going to result in additional costs when we're actually in a position we need to basically bring existing costs under control. But I'll open it up to members to see whether they have any views on 2.3. Alistair?
I agree entirely with your sentiments, sir, and I would hope everyone else does as well.
Any member otherwise minded? No? Okay. Recommendations quite fast. I just want to come back to make sure we've covered everything that members have raised, though. I don't want to miss anything out, because obviously it's an item of significant importance. Ian, are you happy with the wording we've got around the support that Zero Waste Scotland are going to provide initially? Or is there anything you wish to add to it?
Is it inappropriate for Zero Waste Scotland to give us what basically was given to the council back in January and February? I think members really do deserve to actually see what the... I
don't want to stop you, Ian, but I don't think any member here has any idea what you're talking about, so I think it would be a bit hard to ask for a decision on that when members won't actually know what you're talking about, because I'm certainly not aware of the content of what you're referring to. But certainly I would imagine that you would provide the information and any support that Zero Waste Scotland are providing. They would provide that information to members as part of the future report, I'd imagine. Yeah.
In that case, I'll circulate all members of the committee.
Okay, do we have any other points on the recommendation?
Thanks, Chair. Just insofar as this meeting is concerned, I feel, and I'm sure other members feel, that this has been extremely fruitful, albeit on so many negatives that are contained within the paper. I am concerned, however, that if the next meeting is not taking place until January next year, that we ensure that, like today, the space is left open for this very important matter to be discussed, and not to have the landscape cluttered with any other issues. In other words, another single item agenda opportunity for members to examine what information comes back.
Absolutely, I'll certainly take that into account to see. I mean, I think the first point is that the PFI reports will come in November, so that'll allow members to obviously discussion around a lot of that stuff. And let's look at how many reports we're talking about for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if there's a number of reports there, then taking as a single item agenda, I think would be a good way forward and have a detailed discussion. But we'll look at those as the reports develop and keep members up to date on that. Okay, members. I don't have any further business. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and thank you to our guests from Zero Waste Scotland. Thank you.